This is still a major opportunity for them to talk, to get to know each other, to size each other up a little bit.
Analysis of a major event this week at the Vatican, as the Pope called the College of Cardinals into session, the new princes of the Church, and the private extraordinary consistory, what it could mean for the next papal conclave.
It completely changed our family. It changed because it's not just that we go to the Latin Mass, it's that we live our traditional faith.
As Catholic churches begin to shut down the traditional Latin Mass in many locations, we talk to those who say it will be desperately missed. A look at the coming changes and the reasons for them. Remembering the needs of a war-torn land, famed singer Andrea Bocelli sings for Ukraine aid.
I want to glorify our beauty. I want the beauty of our women and our mothers to be understood by the Western man.
And ahead of the Pope's visit to Kazakhstan later this month, we visit a Kazakh artist determined to create a Madonna masterwork. EWTN News In Depth starts now. A consequential week at the Vatican as Pope Francis convenes the College of Cardinals to elevate 20 new church leaders to the position of cardinal and to gather all of them together behind closed doors to talk about the future of the church. Welcome to EWTN News In Depth. The meeting of the College of Cardinals, known as a consistory, is of special note coming at this time in Francis's papacy. As the years go by, Pope Francis's influence in the College of Cardinals increases as a larger percentage of cardinal electors, those who will select the next pope, are those he elevated. This week's extraordinary consistory is the first gathering of its kind in 7 years. EWTN Rome Bureau Chief Andreas Tannhauser reports.
After more than 7 years, this week, Pope Francis summoned all cardinals for an extraordinary consistory. On August 29th and 30th, the Holy Father met with 197 princes of the Church, as cardinals are also known. They discussed the state of the Church around the world. A special focus was given to the new constitution of the Vatican, which came into effect in June this year. It brought a reorganization of the Curia, the church government. This was the first time since 2015 that the cardinals had the opportunity to meet each other in person. They were joined by 20 new ones that Pope Francis had created just 2 days before, on August 27th, in an ordinary consistory. Almudena Martinez, who covers the Vatican for Asi Prensa with a special focus on Latin American countries, shares her impressions from the consistory.
We have seen maybe the most universal consistory these past days here at the Vatican, where cardinals went from all over the world. We have seen from the Pope Francis naming cardinals from Nigeria, Korea, the first one named in Paraguay, even the youngest that comes from Mongolia. We could talk with the cardinals named the past Saturday that come from Colombia and Paraguay. It was the first name in Paraguay after 400 of years of history of the church there. They were very impressed, very honored, and they told us that they have a really big responsibility.
EWTN Executive Editor Matthew Bunson is an expert on the College of Cardinals. We asked him how he perceived the meeting and what it means for the church in the coming years.
We're here in St. Peter's Square just before the final Mass of the Consistory will take place this year. Pope Francis will address one more time the faithful and, of course, the newly created cardinals and all the other cardinals he summoned here to Rome to discuss Predicate Evangelii, the new constitution of the Vatican. But Matthew, do we know anything else about this extraordinary consistory that took place here?
Yes, well, we know that Francis has brought all of the College of Cardinals together. That in itself is significant. Francis, we know, has been talking with them. But more important, I would argue, from the standpoint of the College of Cardinals, is for the cardinals to be able to talk to each other. Yes, they've been divided up into language groups to facilitate better communication amongst themselves. But this is still a major opportunity for them to talk, to get to know each other, to size each other up a little bit, especially as we move inexorably, we don't know when, but toward a future conclave.
What does that mean for the church and for the future of the church?
I think it's a combination of several things. With Francis, a lot of these appointments are very personal. So these are people that he sees as kindred spirits who sort of share some of his ideas about pastoral care, about accompaniment. But then there's also that idea, again, of hearing all from the corners of the church. Cardinals who represent places like Tonga and Rabat and New Zealand, places that historically have not had major representation in the College of Cardinals, but that Francis wants to make sure that we're hearing. It makes, in many ways, anticipating or even handicapping what a future conclave could look like virtually impossible, because we don't know what the cardinals actually are thinking.
Of the 20 newly created cardinals, only 16 will be able to vote in a future conclave for the next pope because they are younger than 80 years. Altogether, there are 132 who have the voting age. The majority of these were created by Pope Francis, who appointed more and more cardinals from non-European countries. This pays tribute to the growing strength of the Church in Asia and Africa. At the final Mass, Pope Francis was clear in his message to all his cardinals, regardless of their origin. He reminded them that we have the same mission to evangelize the world as did the apostles 2,000 years ago. In Rome, Andreas Tonhauser, EWTN News In Depth.
We're fortunate to be joined now by two more of our EWTN colleagues who both closely watched and reported on the consistory. Andrea Gagliarducci is the Vatican analyst for Aci Stampa, and Hannah Brockhouse is senior correspondent based in Rome for the Catholic News Agency. Thank you both for joining us. Andrea, you have made it your profession to become an expert on the Vatican. In the papacy of Pope Francis, what do you make of the timing of this extraordinary consistory when cardinals from all over the world were able to meet and talk to one another face to face?
Well, this consistory was expected this year. It was not expected in August for many reasons. It's first of all a mood breaker for the Roman Curia, because there is vacation in August that usually goes until September at one point. And so it was strange. And then it was not traditional at all. The last consistory that took place in August was in 1808, 19th century, and it was a secret consistory. So it was kind of strange, but it was expected. Just think that Pope Francis needed to refill the number of cardinals eligible to vote in a conclave. The cardinals eligible to vote in a conclave are beyond 80, and during this year, some 10 cardinals were going to turn 80. So the Pope needed some new cardinals. And it was expected also because Pope Francis always had a consistory every year since 2014. The only year he didn't have a consistory was 2020-21, last year, and was strange, actually was expected last year. So the timing was proper, the timing was expected, August was not expected, and that led to many speculations about what was going to happen, but as you saw, nothing happens in the end.
Nothing too crazy and definitely overdue. Hannah, there was a very clear international dimension to the consistory, but just one American was named. What do viewers need to know about Cardinal Robert McElroy of San Diego?
Well, Cardinal McElroy is both the newest and the youngest cardinal for the United States at just 68 years old. He is known for having a pastoral style very similar to Pope Francis. So he has placed a strong emphasis on the plight of migrants, for the environment, and on the homeless. He has also had a strong emphasis on the Synod on Synodality, as that is ongoing in the Vatican and in the whole Church.
Andrea, since the cardinal discussions were broken down into language groups, were they really able to get to know each other outside of their regions?
Well, it was difficult for them to know each other, although some of them were happy that were able to meet better some of their confreres. But the real issue was not getting to know each other. It was also that, but this consistory was summoned to discuss about Curia reform. And actually, there was no possibility to have a clear discussion on Curia reform if not broken into groups. And all the interventions were in the end given to the Secretariat because there was no possibility to have all intervention all together, which was what the cardinals wanted to do. So there was no possibility for them not even to know each other, but also to know what the other confreres thought about the Curia reform.
That'll be an important thing to address for Pope Francis. Hannah, you interviewed the newly appointed Cardinal Lazarus Yuhong-sik, who is from South Korea, but also serves as prefect for the dicastery for clergy. What perspective does he bring to the college?
Well, of course, as the Catholic Church continues to grow in Asia, it's extremely important to have his perspective in the Vatican about the Church in Asia and Catholics there. He also brings a perspective of persecuted peoples and persecuted Christians. He's visited North Korea several times, and I think that will be a very useful perspective for Pope Francis. He said in his role as prefect of the dicastery for clergy, he wants to encourage priests and he wants to help them through formation, ongoing formation, to better base their lives and their service on the Word of God. So he kind of highlighted that as an emphasis that he's bringing to this role.
Mirroring something that Pope Francis has continued to emphasize. One more question for both of you. First, Andrea, there were high expectations for this first extraordinary consistory since 2015. You talked to many people for your reporting. What has their reaction been over the last week?
Well, as I said before, there were expectations to be able to talk all together about the Curia reform, at least to discuss some of the points of the reform, but there was no possibility. So there was some disappointment in many of the cardinals I talked to. They wanted to address some issues, although the Curia reform is already a reality. You know, they were not summoned before the Curia reform was established. Some of them were happy with the moment they had with their confreres, but, you know, it was mostly because they were able to meet together. It was for some of them the first consistory of this kind. And you know that since 2015, Pope Francis has not summoned any kind of this kind of extraordinary consistory. So they were happy to make the experience. But generally, you know, there is a little disappointment and also some curiosity because they got used to Pope Francis' surprises. So they know that if nothing happened during this consistory, something will happen soon.
Something will happen soon. Hannah, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, of course, at the consistory to create the cardinals, there was a lot of joy, especially from people coming from the countries where they received new cardinals. But I'll echo what Andrea said about kind of mixed reviews, mixed feelings on the extraordinary consistory. Obviously, it's been 7 years since they were able to all last meet together, whether these 2 days of meetings, this long weekend of encounters was able to, produce enough time and opportunity for them to really exchange ideas remains to be seen.
We'll be watching for that. Thank you both for joining us to discuss this important moment in our church. In the middle of this week's consistories, Pope Francis took part in a centuries-old tradition known as the Celestinian forgiveness. He first greeted the faithful in L'Aquila, Italy, where he celebrated an outdoor mass. He then became the first pope in more than 700 years to open the holy door of the cathedral as part of the annual celebration established by Pope St. Celestine V. It focuses on forgiveness and grace, and as Pope Francis said, the experience of turning anguish and guilt into freedom and joy. All of this as Pope Francis begins his next catechesis series on spiritual discernment. At his general audience on Wednesday, he said he will provide reflections on the demanding work of making sound judgments and the right choices. Pope Francis says discernment requires both self-knowledge and a relationship with God. This new topic replaces his last 18-week-long cycle of catechesis on old age. There's much more ahead. Next, a big change is about to go into effect for those who love the Latin Mass. That story right after the break.
What comes with the traditional Latin Mass, what comes with any of our authentic Catholic traditions, it's a culture. It's something that the families don't live just here at Sunday Mass. It's something that enables our families to have the tools to live their faith practically at home all the week.
We explore what's ahead as the number of traditional Latin Mass offerings shrinks to fewer parishes.
She's wearing Kazakh clothes, as she was from a poor and simple family, so the clothes show the beauty and at the same time the modesty and dignity of the Kazakh woman.
And a special work of art being created just in time for a blessing from Pope Francis. The significance of this Madonna and Child coming up. Liturgical reform from Vatican II brought about renewal and change within the global Catholic Church. Now, almost 60 years later, debate still surrounds the use of the traditional Latin Mass. With a focus on unity, Pope Francis called for restrictions on the traditional Mass, but some Catholics in the U.S. are starting to feel the impact of those restrictions because they believe the old tradition renews their faith. Mark Irons explains in this Catholic Life report.
For most Catholics in America, Sunday Mass doesn't quite look or sound like this. This is the traditional Latin Mass, also known as the extraordinary form of the Mass, since it isn't common to see it in most Catholic churches. It's happening inside a small country parish in Benedict, Maryland. But the Catholic families here won't be able to fill these pews and worship like this much longer.
We've been so grateful to have this parish, and we're very sad to see what's happening.
Soon, Sarah Buck, her husband Josh, and their 5 children, along with all their fellow parishioners at St. Francis de Sales Church, will have to go elsewhere if they want to attend the traditional Latin Mass.
We just can't leave. I mean, it's been beautiful.
We've always been very Catholic in the traditional sense.
On September 21st, the Archdiocese of Washington, covering the District of Columbia and parts of Maryland, will officially implement restrictions placed on the extraordinary form of the Mass, following new rules set forth last year by Pope Francis. The Archdiocese of Washington is just one of the church territories around the world in the process of responding to or enforcing the Pope's directive entitled Traditionis Custodes, meaning guardians of the tradition. In it, the Pope called for greater unity and less division within the church, saying he desires to press on ever more in the constant search for ecclesial communion. For 4 centuries, the Tridentine, or traditional Latin Mass, was the most common Eucharistic liturgy in the Church. But that changed in the 1960s. Liturgical renewal at the Second Vatican Council would call for full and active participation among lay Catholics at Mass. And in 1969, what is known today as the Novus Ordo Mass, Latin for New Order, was introduced. Also referred to as the ordinary form of the Mass, it's now the most common way that Mass is celebrated in Roman Catholic churches. If you've been to both forms, you can probably spot some noticeable differences in the liturgy, and you will hear them too. The traditional Mass is celebrated in Latin, while Latin is the official text of the Novus Ordo. It is normally celebrated in the vernacular, the language common to the particular region of the world where it's being celebrated. So in the U.S., English.
Brothers and sisters, that my sacrifice and yours may be acceptable to God.
Following the Second Vatican Council, Popes John Paul II and Benedict XVI both allowed accommodations for the celebration of the traditional Latin Mass, while still recognizing the legitimate reforms of Vatican II and the Novus Ordo Mass as the new ordinary form of Mass for Catholics. But now Pope Francis has expressed concerns that accommodations for Latin Mass made in hopes of meeting the different liturgical needs of Catholics and unifying the whole Church have been exploited, and encourage disagreements that injure the Church, block her path, and expose her to the peril of division. Pope Francis isn't banning Latin Mass, but he has ordered guidelines to be followed, and he's leaving it to local bishops to decide how to best enforce them. In the Archdiocese of Washington, church communities built around the traditional Latin Mass and the priests who guide them are having a hard time grappling with this new reality.
I don't see clearly right now the road ahead, but we'll do the best that we can.
Father Kevin Cusick is the pastor at St. Francis de Sales. He has always offered the Novus Ordo Mass here and will continue. But about 6 years ago, he made a decision. Father Cusick described his parish as being on the verge of death, with low Mass attendance and a stagnating faith within the community. But things started to change and the parish started to flourish when he began to predominantly offer the traditional Latin Mass.
It's almost a mystery to me, but I think it just comes with a holistic embrace of all of our Catholic values. That here we have a very intense experience of community.
At St. Francis de Sales, you'll find packed pews and notice a lot of young families who have found something fresh and invigorating in a Mass that is considered old.
You know, our children are moved by everything that they see. I mean, it's a whole experience of the senses. It's not just, you know, sitting there. It's what you see, what you hear, what you smell with the incense. Everything is touched, and understanding that it's all for the glory of God.
In America, it is a relatively small community. According to a Catholic news agency report, there are about 150,000 traditional Latin Mass-going Catholics, less than 1% of regular Mass-going Catholics in the U.S. But amongst this minority, there is passion and commitment.
There is vibrancy. There is a zeal not only for the liturgy, but there's a zeal for the church.
For 33 years, Patrick Lally has been going to St. Mary Mother of God Parish in downtown D.C., where he attends the traditional Latin Mass. St. Mary's offers the Novus Ordo Mass as well, but Lally feels a level of deep spiritual fulfillment and reverence participating in the extraordinary form. He welcomed us into his home a few blocks from St. Mary's. He isn't sure of the road ahead for himself or his parish, which could lose parishioners and financial contributions with the loss of the Latin Mass.
The primary concern for me is the loss of the Latin Mass in my parish. It's this notion that the Latin Mass shouldn't be part of parochial life.
Among the limitations ordered by Pope Francis, unless an exception is requested and granted, there is to be no celebration of the extraordinary form of the Mass in parish churches. The Archdiocese of Washington has ordered the removal of the Latin Mass in all parishes and designated 3 locations where it can continue on Sundays, including St. Dominic Mission Church, a few miles from St. Francis de Sales in southern Maryland. This church is just 10 minutes down the road, and there is the option to continue the traditional Latin Mass here. But parishioners at St. Francis de Sales say what isn't built here is that established community that they had for years.
Oh, we'll definitely disperse it.
And there are practical concerns. Sid Marcus is a longtime parishioner at St. Francis de Sales, and he's seen the community grow. He says St. Dominic will only hold 1/3 the capacity of St. Francis.
You know, we can't all go there for one Mass. It's not going to happen. We can't physically. Fire marshal will be there in a heartbeat.
Sarah and Josh Buck worry about fitting their growing family into the new church.
You know, we fill up a pew by ourselves. We're just not going to have the space for my family and other families like us.
Father Cusick finds Latin Mass restrictions within the broader church confusing when he's found his own parishioners to be very committed to the Catholic faith and church teaching.
I struggle to understand why at the same time our bishops are decrying the loss of Catholic identity and above all the loss of Catholic belief in the true and real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Why are we trying everything else but our own Catholic tradition?
Another concern Pope Francis raised in his letter to bishops accompanying Traditionis Custodes was that the use of traditional Latin Mass is often characterized by a rejection not only of the liturgical reform, but of the Vatican Council II itself, claiming with unfounded and unsustainable assertions that it betrayed the tradition and the true church. The Pope continues by saying to doubt the Vatican II Council is to doubt the Holy Spirit himself who guides the church. Although it may be true of some Latin Mass communities, Patrick Lally and Pastor Cusick both said they don't find a rejection of Vatican II within their own communities. And they both said they don't have a problem with the Novus Ordo Mass, but there are concerns about it being celebrated in an irreverent way.
I think it should be deeply offensive to every Catholic.
Pope Francis adds agreement in his letter to bishops. I am saddened by abuses in the celebration of the liturgy on all sides. With the goal of unity in mind, a question remains: could there be a way forward? Could liturgical energy from both the laity and clergy be directed toward ensuring the Novus Ordo Mass is done in a beautiful, reverent way, incorporating elements of the old into the new, guarding, growing, and passing on the Catholic tradition? Mark Irons, EWTN News In Depth.
Bishops around the world will implement the Pope's directive on the traditional Latin Mass differently. He's asked them to do what is best for their communities, while keeping in mind the need to return to a unitary form of celebration. As for the Novus Ordo, Pope Francis is asking his bishops to be vigilant, to ensure Mass is reverent and celebrated with decorum and fidelity to the liturgical books implemented after Vatican II. News headlines are next in the Week in Review. Plus, inside a new residence in Los Angeles for homeless pregnant women who have nowhere else to turn. We'll be right back. A United Nations report alleging serious human rights violations in China tops the Week in Review. Released this week, the long-awaited report about treatment of Uyghur Muslims and other religious minority groups sparked fury inside the Chinese government. Human rights groups have accused China of sweeping more than 1 million minority groups into detention camps, where many detainees say they've been tortured, sexually assaulted, and forced to abandon their religion. The United Nations assessment was released just before midnight on Wednesday, in the final minutes before the retirement of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. Uyghurs who have fled overseas expressed relief that the report was issued, worried that it would never be published. Many see it as a vindication of their years of advocacy work and recognition of China's brutal crackdown.
It is a slap on Chinese government's face to release this report. And from the reaction by the Chinese government, we could see this is a big deal. In the end, we all, we have been suffering for so long. Majority of us don't know what happened to our families.
Mahmoud said the atrocities mentioned in the report brought her to tears. China is furiously denouncing the report, calling it a fabrication cooked up by Western nations. The United Nations is calling on China to release all detained individuals and to clarify the whereabouts of the vast number of people who have disappeared. A team of United Nations nuclear experts arrived late this week at that embattled Ukrainian nuclear power plant. The inspectors are assessing potential damage to the facility after heavy shelling in the area. The plant is Europe's largest and was seized by Russian forces early in the war. It has sustained artillery strikes, uncontrolled fires, and power outages. Scientists have warned of a potential nuclear disaster that could affect large portions of Europe if the plant's safety systems do not remain intact. The International Atomic Energy Agency has pleaded for a ceasefire around the plant. More news about Ukraine in a few minutes, including an update from the Director General of EWTN Ukraine about continued church efforts to minister to the faithful despite wartime challenges. The Centers for Disease Control says life is getting shorter in the United States. Life expectancy dropped by nearly a year between 2020 and 2021, and by more than 2.5 years overall since the start of the COVID pandemic. Life expectancy now stands at 76.1 years. That's the lowest it's been in the U.S. since 1996, and the biggest two-year decline in a century. The CDC says COVID-19 is the main factor in shortening American lives. New research shows Black Americans have better heart health if they hold deep spiritual beliefs or participate in religious activities. The Journal of the American Heart Association surveyed 3,000 Black Mississippi residents. They were grouped according to self-reported religious behaviors such as frequent church attendance, private prayer, and feeling God's presence. Researchers found the more religious participants had better cardiovascular health, including better blood pressure and cholesterol levels. The study is the largest community-based investigation of cardiovascular disease among African Americans in the U.S. California lawmakers sent more than a dozen bills this week to Governor Gavin Newsom aimed at strengthening the Golden State's already expansive protections for abortion. Legislation will soon allow nurse practitioners to perform first trimester abortions without the supervision of a physician, prohibit coroner investigations after the death of a fetus, and set aside $20 million for abortion access in Los Angeles County alone. That money was included in the $200 million in new funding for reproductive care that helps pay for abortion services statewide for the uninsured. This fall, Californians will vote on enshrining abortion as a right in the state constitution. While some Californians are intent on increasing abortion access, others are intent on increasing access to care for the mother and child. Harvest Home in Los Angeles provides housing and programs for homeless pregnant mothers. It just opened a new maternity home in conjunction with the Diocese of Los Angeles. The 18-bedroom building is a former convent and the second residence run by Harvest Home in the LA area. Miranda Vatterott, a therapist at Harvest Home and former case manager there, sees firsthand the importance of embracing and providing care for both mother and child. Miranda, thank you for joining us. Housing helps provide these mothers with stability and with a sense of safety. Can you elaborate on the programs you offer? What are they learning when they come to Harvest Home?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we offer housing. And when they're here, they learn parenting skills, care for their child. They can take care of their emotional well-being through our therapy services, physical well-being through classes we provide for that, as well as spiritual well-being through our classes here as well.
And when they come to you, what are the reasons that women are citing for needing help? Is the homelessness crisis or the opioid crisis contributing to the need for your work?
Yeah, so the women come here for a variety of reasons. Housing instability, the cost of living in Los Angeles County is quite high. So sometimes it's just a little hiccup, such as a car accident, that throws them into a spiral where they end up being evicted. Some of them are couch surfing or coming from unstable or unhealthy relationships.
And are you seeing that you're getting support from religious people only, or is it all hands on deck, all kinds of people helping you in your mission?
It's all hands on deck here. So we have private individual donors, private foundations who help us, as well as church partners.
Miranda, in opening the Pico home, you ended up partnering with the LA Archdiocese. Is this the first time you partner with a Catholic entity?
Yes, we are so happy that we've been able to open up this new home, which is nearly triples the impact that we have on the women and children we serve.
That's wonderful. What has that been like?
Well, just opening up a larger home has brought so much joy into the home. The women are really excited to have bigger rooms, have more areas to gather, and we are just so grateful that the Archdiocese has supported us in this way.
Miranda, that means many, many homes and rooms. How many women are you serving?
So we are able to serve up to 28 women and children.
28 women, that's a lot of lives. Well, thank you so much for what you're doing, and we look forward to hearing more.
Thank you so much.
Pope John Paul I will be beatified on Sunday in the final step towards sainthood. Often called the Smiling Pope, he died unexpectedly after just 33 days in office in 1978. The miraculous recovery of a girl in Buenos Aires suffering from a severe disease affecting the brain is attributed to Pope John Paul I's intercession. The 65-year-old was known for his humility, emphasis on spiritual poverty, and his dedication to teaching the faith so everyone could understand it. We'll be right back.
I think everyone wants peace. That's everyone's hope.
We sit down with opera star Andrea Bocelli to talk to him about his musical efforts to raise money for Ukraine.
It was a very painful experience, very sad, but at the same moment I felt a kind of hope, the hope in the faces and the smiles of children.
Heartache and hope living side by side, the work one missionary sister launched to provide a small respite for Ukrainian children. And hope is alive for the children as millions go back to school in Ukraine. A look at the first day of classes this week. EWTN News In Depth is coming right back.
Così duramente provata dalla violenza e dalla distruzione della guerra crudele e insensata in cui è stata trascinata.
The Holy Father condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine back in April drew cheers. Just this week, the Vatican issued the strongest words yet against the war, calling it morally unjust, unacceptable, barbaric, senseless, repugnant, and sacrilegious. 6 months in, and there's no end in sight. While media coverage of the destruction and refugees has diminished over time, the work of the church has not. EWTN Ukraine has remained unwavering in its mission to bring the word of God to the faithful there. Our priests and staff broadcast Holy Mass and Adoration from the EWTN Chapel in Kyiv and Masses from several other churches throughout Ukraine. They continue to air talk shows and other programming to spread the gospel and serve as a common link for Catholics in the region. Our EWTN colleague, Father Alexander Zelinsky in Kyiv, says while it's safer there than areas in eastern Ukraine, there's always uncertainty.
We don't know also when could fly some rockets, missiles to Kiev. So when sometimes when I go to sleep, then I think that yes, it maybe will be my last night.
Father Alexander is documenting the work of the Catholic Church amid this war and the help it's providing to those in need, including the new mission of Sister Victoria Kavolchuk of the Servants of the Holy Spirit. She began a workshop with children, she says, need an outlet and the emotional support of being in community to get through this time.
We have classes of English and we have handicrafts, different activities for the kids. We create beautiful pictures and different souvenirs with our hands, and we enjoy being together. We enjoy the weather in spite of all this sadness and all this suffering that people survived.
Sister Victoria recently arrived in Ukraine and is in the process of inviting more children into her programs. Aid for Ukraine is also coming in from the entertainment world. Famed opera singer Andrea Bocelli held a special concert to raise money for the victims of the war. EWTN Rome correspondent Colin Flynn gives us a behind-the-scenes look at the musical night.
For Andrea Bocelli, this is the most important concert of the year, performing in his hometown of Laiatico in Tuscany, Italy. And singing with him on stage is a choir of children who are using their voices to sing for peace. But it was just a few months ago that these children and their families were far from here, fighting to stay alive. Like millions of other Ukrainians, these families have fled the war, leaving their homes, relatives, all their belongings, just in search of safety. They traveled through Europe and ended up here in the Tuscany region of Italy, like Irina and her children.
I was at home getting ready for work one day when I got a phone call from my mother-in-law who told me the war had started. I couldn't believe it. I live in a region which is close to the Russian and Belarusian border, so we were the first to be hit.
It must have been very frightening and incredibly stressful.
Yes, I was so frightened because there were explosions and shooting, and I'd never experienced anything like this. I was so frightened. The explosions sounded like constant thunder.
Her children, too, remember the horror of war starting right outside their front door.
I remember a lot of things, especially when planes were flying over us at night and we could hear them.
And at night we could hear explosions. I was very scared.
When the families arrived here in Italy, they didn't have anywhere to stay. Jobs, money, food. They badly needed support. And thankfully, many people offered assistance, like the world-famous Italian singer Andrea Bocelli.
I think everyone wants peace. That's everyone's hope. War is the most foolish thing. A place as far removed from human intelligence and reason as we can envisage.
And Andrea, when you meet the Ukrainian children and their families, and you hear their stories and what they've gone through, how does it affect you?
L'effetto è sempre quello, ha sempre il sapore della tragedia, no?
My feeling is that this is a tragedy.
His charity, the Andrea Bocelli Foundation, offer the refugees places to stay, food, medicine, and anything else they may need. And him being Andrea Bocelli, he offered them something else too. Singing classes for the children, a way to distract their minds from the reality of what's happening back home and express themselves through music. They're called the ABF Voices of Peace Choir. How did the idea come about for the Voices of Peace Choir?
The idea of the Voices of Peace Children's Choir started because music has such a strong ability to help children's development. It can help them psychologically and even spiritually.
And now, this choir of Ukrainian children is being put center stage, because tonight, at one of Andrea Bocelli's biggest and most important annual concerts, right here in this stunning amphitheatre in his hometown of Lyatico, they will be performing with the soprano in front of 10,000 people. Irina's kids are excited, but nervous too.
I'm a little nervous because I don't want to do something wrong, but I hope everything will be fine. People are helping us. It makes me happy.
What do you want people to think and to feel when they hear you singing on stage?
I am so happy that there are people who support Ukraine. I really want peace in our country, and I want to be able to go back home and see everyone as soon as possible.
And after fleeing Ukraine and the war, for the children, this is something for them to be excited about and to look forward to. A night when they can forget and just sing and be kids.
This really brings me happiness. I actually think it's like a blessing from God. I'm really so happy to be here.
As night falls, backstage, the kids peep out onto the stage and the lights and the cameras and the huge crowd, waiting for their moment. What are you hoping will come from that performance? What are you hoping it will do for the children, for their families, and for everybody who hears it?
I can only hope that these children take away with them a happy memory. Memories of an audience that listened to them with love and empathy. These children, maybe until the day before, were in unbelievably tough situations, now find themselves singing beautiful music that speaks to all those willing to listen. It is something miraculous. And I hope that this experience will mean every child and every human will have the hope that they deserve.
In Lyatico, Italy, Colm Flynn, EWTN News In Depth.
Great humanitarian work for Ukraine by one of the world's most famous singers. Despite the ongoing war, it was back to school this past Thursday for millions of Ukrainian children. For many, their last day of school was in February, the day before the Russian invasion of their country. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited a school damaged by Russian shelling and restored just in time for the beginning of the academic year. In 6 months of war, nearly 2,500 schools in Ukraine have been damaged and nearly 300 destroyed. But these children, many dressed in traditional Ukrainian clothing, were part of an effort to show that Ukraine stands strong.
I do not want to show my personality in this work because I believe that the real art is anonymous.
This artist says the main thing is the image itself. Why he is so determined to create the first ever Madonna with a Kazakh appearance. That story's next.
The Central Asian country of Kazakhstan will host the 7th Congress of Leaders of World and Traditional Religions later this month. Pope Francis is expected to attend, as will delegations from 60 countries, to include representatives from Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, and other religions. An artist from Kazakhstan is busy getting ready for the Pope's arrival, because his art, an icon depicting Madonna with child, will be blessed by the Pope. EWTN producer Alexei Gotovsky visited the artist and explains why this Kazakh Madonna is so unique.
The inspiration that came for this work is the love for the mother, and we Kazakhs have a special reverence for mothers. This image is very communal, uniting me with all of humanity, because she's our mother, and because we're all born thanks to our own mothers.
Dazbol Kasymov is painting the first ever Kazakh Madonna, Mother of the Great Steppes, dedicated to the Central Asian Marian Shrine of Ozernaya. The painting will be personally blessed by Pope Francis during his visit to Kazakhstan. Kasymov says that the unique challenge he faces is to link the religious canons with the traditions of Kazakh national art and integrate them together.
Kazakhs consider it not quite right or polite for a woman to look directly into the face. A woman shouldn't look at the spectator directly. She looks a little into the distance. It's a trait of modesty and a part of etiquette.
The painting is still under Kasymov's brush, and the image of baby Jesus will continue to be transformed under the creative process.
He's the one I'm working on right now. His hairstyle was different, and then I did his hair, and now I want to have time to change his style back. I still have a lot of searching to do. On the one hand, he doesn't want to break away from his mother, but on the other, somewhere in the depths of his little subconscious, he understands that he has a path. I see him as a young hero. He's actually walked the path of a warrior. This is such a very difficult path, and no one can walk it. You need to have strength, and this I need to portray. I wrapped him in this robe. That's his future tunic that he's going to wear on the cross.
The image of the Virgin Mary represents a Kazakh woman from a simple family, but yet shows the beauty, modesty, and dignity of the women of the steppes.
This is a woman's headdress called chemishek, which a married woman wears. When the girl we invited to pose wore it, she said how convenient it is to feed a baby with. In general, it's believed that the hair should be hidden completely, but I opened a little to show that this is a living person. This is a living woman with a baby.
Traditional ornaments are adoring the image and recalling Christian roots of some of the Kazakh tribes.
His nimbus is made in the form of a star. On one side it is a flower, on the other side it's a star, and on the third side it's part of the Kazakh carpet called tuskais. And Jesus has a halo in the form of a Shanarak cross. Look at some of the Shanarak fragments here at the base of the Shanarak, which is an upper part of a Kazakh house. My mother comes from the Kare tribe, and the Kare were once, as history says in ancient times, Christians. Of course, these connections are here. So here in the ornaments, I inserted these symbols.
Dazbol Kasimov confesses that the image of the mother has always been present in his work. And Our Lady, Mother of the Great Steps, at this stage fulfills his artistic search for a mother figure. He hopes that this painting will find its place in the hearts of the people of Kazakhstan. In Kazakhstan, Alexei Gotovsky, EWTN News In Depth.
Next week, Alexei, who is a native of Kazakhstan, joins us again to tell us more about his homeland and why the Pope's visit is so important to the small but growing Catholic community there. That report, plus a deep dive into the current state of affairs in the U.S. following the Supreme Court's historic decision in the Dobbs case. We'll look at the evolving political and pastoral implications. Thank you for joining us for this edition of EWTN News In Depth. I'm Montse Alvarado. We'll see you next time.